History remembers the 300 Spartans as the men who fell at Thermopylae to protect Greece. But what history rarely talks about is what happened next, because the story didn't end with their deaths. We were told the Spartan war machine was buried in that blood-soaked pass beside their king. It wasn't. When the fog lifted and the smoke cleared, they were still there. Not 300, 10,000. And they weren't marching to defend their land, they were coming to settle a debt. My name is Arash, a spearman of the Achaemenid Empire. And to understand the horror that awaited us, you first need to understand the pride we carried into that rally. For a year, we believed we were unstoppable. We had crushed kingdoms. We had marched past the butchered bodies of King Leonidas and his 300 at the Hot Gates. We left their remains to the birds and swept deeper into Greece like a living storm. We burned their sacred temples into ash. We looted Athens. We drove its people from their homes and watched their great city burn beneath the night sky. I still remember standing on a hillside, spear in hand, staring at the Acropolis wrapped in fire. Ash filled the air, heat rolled across our faces. In that moment, we thought we were witnessing the death of a civilization. We thought Greece was finished. Our god King Xerxes had already lost interest in the campaign. He returned to Persia, leaving General Mardonius behind with 300,000 men to finish what we started. And why wouldn't we be confident? We had the immortals. We had cavalry in overwhelming numbers. We had archers so many their arrows could darken the sky. We were certain the Greeks would fall to their knees, offer earth and water, and accept their fate. But when we reached the plains of Boeotia and looked across the muddy banks of the Esopus River, the confidence began to crack. The laughter disappeared. Mardonius called them weak, a divided alliance of farmers, citymen, and politicians who would collapse the second pressure mounted. But the soldiers in the front ranks, men like me who had survived the slaughter at Thermopylae, knew better. We knew what that red cloak meant across the field. They wore red so no one could see them bleed. And on the right side of the Greek line stood the Spartans, a solid wall of bronze, perfectly still, perfectly unbroken. 10,000 of them. And suddenly it felt like even 300,000 might not be enough. To understand what it means to face Spartans in battle. Most armies shout to drown out their fear. They bang weapons on shields, scream prayers to their gods, and charge wildly just to keep panic from swallowing them whole. Spartans do none of that. They don't yell, they don't boast, they don't chant. They just stand there under the brutal Greek sun, wrapped in bronze and oak, waiting for the signal to kill. For more than a week, neither side moved. The tension sat on our chests like stone. The Greeks wouldn't cross the river, knowing our cavalry would rip them apart in open ground. And even Mardonius, arrogant as he was, knew better than to send us uphill into that bronze fortress. So we waited. and the waiting became its own kind of torture. The sun hammered down day after day. The earth cracked beneath our feet. The stink of hundreds of thousands of men, horses, rot, and waste smothered the camp. Disease began to spread. Nerves frayed. Men stared at that silent red line across the valley until it felt like madness itself was staring back. So Mardonius chose a different weapon. If the Greeks wouldn't die by the spear, he would let thirst break them first. He sent in the cavalry, not against their infantry, but deep behind them. Our horsemen tore through their supply routes, hit their baggage lines, and hunted down anyone trying to forage. Then they found the spring, a small source of fresh water called Gargaphia, and it was the only thing keeping the Greek army alive in that scorched landscape. We watched from the hills as our cavalry seized it. They churned the water into mud. They slaughtered the men carrying water back to camp. They dumped the bloated corpses of dead horses into the spring itself. We poisoned the one thing the Greeks couldn't live without. Then we cut off their food. For days, nothing reached their camp. From across the valley, we could see them weakening. Men collapsed from heat and dehydration, trapped inside heavy armor under a merciless sky. Some dropped where they stood, too exhausted even to hold their shields. Mardonius watched them with a smile. He said they would crack before nightfall. He said they would run. And for a moment, it looked like he was right. That night, under a moonless sky, black as pitch, chaos erupted in the Greek camp. We heard weapons clatter to the ground. We heard shouted orders, confusion, panic, commanders trying to regain control. And beneath it all, the sound of thousands of men moving in retreat. The alliance was breaking. At least that's what we thought. We celebrated. Wine flowed through our camp. Men sharpened blades, laughed, and mocked the Greeks for fleeing into the dark. We thought the war was over. By sunrise, the center of the Greek army was gone. The Athenians remained on the far left. The Spartans still held the right. The two wings were separated. To Mardonius, it looked like the perfect chance to crush them for good. So he made the mistake that doomed us all. He didn't wait. He didn't organize. He didn't form proper ranks. He gave the order for a full assault. Wild, rushed, disordered. A screaming mass of men surged across the river, desperate to finish off what we believed were broken survivors. We splashed through the muddy water of the Esopus, drunk on confidence, convinced we were charging towards an easy slaughter. We thought we were hunting dying men. What we were really doing was stepping into a trap. As we climbed the uneven ground toward the Spartans, they didn't retreat, they didn't panic, they even didn't draw their swords. We stopped at range and loosed the arrows, thousands upon thousands of them. The sky went black. The scream of the volley tore through the air like a storm. But the Spartans simply lifted their shields, locked them together, and crouched beneath them. Then they waited. Their commander, Pausanias, stood exposed while arrows shattered around him. In the middle of that storm, he stared at a sacrificial altar, waiting for the priests to read the omens. Arrows found openings in Spartan armor. They struck legs, arms, flesh. Men bled, but no one broke formation. No one cried out. No one moved. They stood there in silence, bleeding and waiting for the gods to say yes. We thought they were frozen with fear. We laughed. We kept firing until the quivers ran dry. And then the arrows stopped. That's when we heard it. Flutes. Soft at first, 1,000 soldiers stepped forward in perfect unison. Thud, thud, thud. The ground trembled under them. Our front line lowered spears and braced for impact. It was hopeless, like trying to stop a tidal wave with sticks and wicker. Their armor was too heavy, their formation too dense, their discipline too absolute. When they hit us, the force crushed the breath from my lungs. The man in front of me was smashed backwards so hard I heard his ribs break. The Spartan phalanx kept moving as if nothing had happened. They didn't fight like individual warriors. That was the horror of it. They fought like a machine, a brutal engine made of bronze, wood, muscle, and perfect discipline. You couldn't even see the face of the man killing you. Only overlapping shields, only the pressure, only the sudden thrust of a spear slipping through the wall, aimed perfectly for the throat. The heat inside that crush was unbearable. Blood, sweat, dirt, and opened bodies turned the air foul and thick. Men stumbled over their own wounded. Panic spread faster than fire. Soldiers who had marched across nations now screamed and fell in the mud, trying to escape a silent wall that never stopped advancing. The Spartans didn't rage, they didn't roar, they just kept coming, step by step, spear thrust by spear thrust, methodical, merciless. I watched men who believed they ruled the world collapse in terror. Then Mardonius realized the disaster unfolding around him. Desperate to rally us, he charged forward on a white horse with his personal guard, hoping his presence could turn the tide. It couldn't. A Spartan seized a jagged stone from the blood-soaked ground and threw it. It struck Mardonius in the head. He fell from his horse before he ever reached their line. The moment he hit the mud, our army broke. Not slowly, completely. The greatest military force on earth threw down weapons and ran. We fled for the wooden walls of our camp, lungs burning, praying the Spartans would stop at the river, praying victory would satisfy them. It didn't. They abandoned formation and came after us at a full sprint, red cloaks streaming behind them like blood in the wind. We chased us across the water. We chased us into our own camp. They tore down barricades, ripped through tents, and slaughtered anyone they caught. There was no mercy, no prisoners. We had come to conquer Greece. Instead, we had awakened something far worse than resistance. We had unleashed a machine built for war. And now we were trapped.